All right, gonna do some armor painting here. We'll see how this looks, see if this is set up well. I need to adjust this just a bit. So I have got a Templar that I'm working on, and you can kind of see some of the armor that I've already painted there. And I'm just going to work a little bit on there. So, you know, with these, this is one of the Legion Builder ones without the trim, so you can see like there's no, you know, none of the details there are painted in. And this is kind of where, when I started customizing Mythic Legions, this is where I started, was, you know, just painting some of these detail parts in here that are sculpted, but not painted on some of the figures. So my first one, I think, was a Cavern Dwarf that I worked on, and I just, you know, kind of painted that black in the middle with some, I think on that one I did like silver trim or something, and it really made it pop. So just going to work on some of that right now. So on this one here, this was all gray. I just painted that black. I'm going to dry brush that in a second with some gold. And then I painted this section here in this Runefang steel. I've moved it. This is normally a Citadel paint, but I moved it into this dropper bottle. And then I'm going to do a red contrast over that to get this look that I'm going for here. So let's see, where do I want to start on this? I think I will start with I'm going to do some Runefang steel on this section here, because I'm going to put red on that part as well. And then we'll do the red and then start working on the gold. So let me get some of this out. Put it in my tray there. Now this one, some paints I find go over like straight onto a mythic figure really well. Hey, good morning, Van. And some paints you kind of have to have a base on it first, or a primer or something. So instead of doing that Runefang steel directly on this middle part, I'm probably going to do some of this. I got some black in this tray here that you can't see. This is a So Flat black paint. It's really good, creates a really good coverage. It's a matte finish. So I'm probably going to put some of that down here first, and then I'll put my Runefang steel on top of it. I hope that's showing up well. Normally, I would have got this little magnifier thing that I would use, but it's kind of hard to do the live video with that in place. It's hard for everybody to see, so I'm going to try it this way. Right now I've just got some reader glasses on, so hopefully that'll let me get in here on these little details that I'm trying to do. So once again, just putting down a little bit of a base just for that other paint to adhere to. Now on this part here, if I go a little bit outside the lines, it's not that big of a deal, because the trim, you know, kind of like on this one, the trim, I'm going to go back and paint this gold on it. So if you go a little bit outside onto that trim, it's not the end of the world, because you're going to paint over it again anyway. So all right, so I'll let that dry for a second. I'm going to start working on some of the gold while I let that dry. This is Retribution armor. Once again, Citadel paint, but I put it in a dropper just because it's easier to use. Now this is a base, so it goes on a little bit better than like the Runefang Steel, which is a layer paint. So I don't need to necessarily put anything else down in front of it. That being said, it doesn't adhere to the plastic as well as some of the other bases. So you kind of got to be a little bit liberal with some of this stuff. And then this is my classic testing it out on my thumb, make sure I got the right thickness of the paint. If you need to thin it down, you can add a little water to it. And then just make sure that my brush has a nice fine point to it that I want. And all I'm doing right now is just going to kind of work on some of these rivets and some of the trim part. So let's go ahead and start with the trim. So you can see, you know, right away, just that little bit of detail there, painting that in, and all you're doing is just kind of, it's like coloring when you're a kid. You know, you're just trying to paint inside the lines. The horsemen have already done the hard work. They've sculpted this and set it up to where all these details are there. All you're doing is kind of following the lines that are there for you. And if you're one of those people that was never able to paint inside the lines, well, I can't help you much with that. But you can see right away that kind of makes that pop and helps bring it out. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Now in this section here, because I'm not planning on painting the middle, you really want to not try to go to the other part of it. But I will touch up if there's any spots where it gets, you know, over where I want it to be. Like, I don't think you're going to be able to see it, but right here it got a little bit onto the silver that I didn't want it to go to. So later on I'm going to paint match that silver and just try to touch that up. I find that for like this Templar colored armor, if I mix a little bit of black with some lead belcher and then water it down, I can get pretty close to that Templar color, at least enough for touch-ups where you don't notice it. If you were painting in a whole part, like so if I was to mix that color and let's say paint this kneecap, it might stand out, but just for a little section like that, it's going to be fine. So, and that's my dog. Hey, buddy, go to your bed. Go. Hey, go to your bed. They're allowed to walk too. All right, sorry about that, folks. Yeah, I know you're mad. And then I forgot to I did the black on this one, but I forgot that I hadn't done it on this one yet, so we'll put that here. Buddy, in your bed. Lay down. Yeah, I know. It's very upsetting. All right. At this point, this one should be dry. Looks like it's pretty dry there. If I wanted to, I could hit it with a heat gun or hair dryer, but it looks pretty good to me. At least enough to put some of this Runefang Steel down on. So Grab some of that. See there, I got a little bit of black in it that was still on my brush. So, okay. Now I'm just painting over this black with the Rune Fang steel to create this kind of bright metal silvery look. And then when I go over it with the red contrast, which is kind of a translucent paint, I'll be able to see some of the metal still underneath of it. It's not super noticeable, but it's enough that you get a really cool look out of it. When I was at Legions Con, there was the night before setup, Eric LeBron had brought out a handful of figures, and one of them that he had was this dwarf that had like this really beautiful purple armor. And I asked him about it, and that was what he did, was he used, you know, I think he said over a lead belcher, but you basically use a metallic, and then you do a contrast over it. And I ended up purchasing that one from at Legions Con. I was really happy with it, so been practicing that technique, and it works pretty well. This one, the black isn't totally dry yet. I'm going to hit it with a heat gun real quick. If you use a hairdryer or a heat gun, you just want to kind of keep it moving. You know, this plastic can be a little soft, so you don't want to melt it by holding it in the same spot for too long. So just something to keep in mind there. But I'm just going over the black parts with this Rune Fang steel. And then I'll switch back to the gold, let this dry, and then come back and get the red contrast here in a bit. So, all right. Now I'm going back to the gold. And so we did the outside there, outside here. I think I'm going to work, trying to decide whether I want to do this whole part on the outside of the knee, just the inside, or just the rivets. And I think I'm just going to go with the rivets. So I'll do that here. And that's the thing with these, you know, four horseman sculpts. There's so much detail in it that you can paint it a variety of different ways and get completely different looks. So I'm just going to start down here on the feet, because I've got some parts up here that are a little wet, and I don't want to touch those while I'm working down. So I'm just going to go down to the feet, work on those, and then kind of go back up. Once again, just minor details here that you're painting, but in the end, you know, all of these really show and pop. If you're trying to get into customizing and you really haven't done a whole lot, hey Patrick, you know, this is a great way to start, is just grab a Legion builder, you know, especially if you can get them when they're doing like a reinforcements wave or something like that. You can get in really cheap to get a couple Legion builders, and then just start with these kind of things: rivets, trim, that kind of stuff. And then work your way towards, you know, maybe some 3D heads, printed heads, that kind of thing. When you start that, I would say don't go immediately for, you know, something with flesh tones, like a dwarf or a human or something like that. I would start with something like a helmeted head that you can do some dry brushing on. And dry brushing is pretty easy. I mean, it's as simple as it sounds. You're taking a paintbrush, you're drying most of the paint off of it, and then you're brushing it on, which really catches a lot of the raised details and not the recessed details. So that would be a good one to start with if you're looking to get into painting heads. Okay. So I'm going to do this ridge underneath here in gold, but I'm going to wait on that because I want to paint the red part in the middle here with the contrast, do the trim on the outsides, and then do that bottom part. So right now I'm just going to put this to the side to dry a little bit. Grab out my other one. Now, this one, I painted this part with the Runefang steel yesterday, so it's good to go. We can start working on some of that red on there, just so I can show you guys, you know, you're not just watching me paint some gold rivets all day long. So here I've got Flesh Terrors red. It's a really dark red, and I'm actually going to put some of this on my wet palette and add just a little bit of water to it. These contrast paints they come out a little translucent, but they're also very concentrated. It's not really like painting with an ink, but it's about the closest thing I can relate it to. So I'm just going to thin it down a little bit with some water, because we still want that metallic look to come through on there. And then I think I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. That one. We'll go with this one here. This is a ZEM 20/0 brush. These ZEM brushes are probably my favorite detail brushes to use. You can get like a 5-pack of them on Amazon for, I think it's like 13 bucks. And I really like these a lot. If you're trying to get really small stuff, they're very helpful. So I'm just practicing there on my thumb, and I want to see, I'm not sure if you can see that on my thumb, but I want to see that red, but I want to be able to see the stuff underneath the red. So I want it to come through. And then I'm just going to start going over this silver with that. Now the thing with these contrast paints, they can be very tricky. They kind of work like a wash in that they will go into the recesses and they'll get dark. So you got to understand that going in, that the recessed areas are going to look darker than the raised areas. And then also you want to make sure that you're working with it while it's wet. And once you see that it starts drying, like right there, it's starting to dry, just leave it alone. Even if it doesn't have the look that you're looking for yet, let it completely dry and then come back to it. If you continue to go over the contrast paint while it's in the process of drying, it's going to start streaking because it'll pull up the stuff that's drying as you do a new brush stroke with new contrast. It'll like pull it up. It's kind of like if you, I don't know if you've ever drawn on a dry erase board, but you used a permanent marker, and then you use a dry erase over top of it, and it'll pick it up. It like pulls off the permanent marker. This is kind of the same kind of idea if you think about it. As it starts to dry on that contrast paint, the new contrast paint, when you rub over it, it picks that old contrast paint up, and then it'll start leaving streaks, and it'll look really weird. So you just have to really, if you're going to start using these contrast paints, you got to practice with it a little bit, get used to it. I would thin them a little. It's not something that I would encourage most brand new users to use. I would practice with some regular bases, maybe even some layers first. And then as you get comfortable, start practicing with some of these contrasts and go from there. But once you do get used to it, you know, like I said, you know, what I saw from Eric at Legions Con was absolutely amazing, and you can get some really cool things from it if you know what you're doing. But it's all about practice and trying new things. Sometimes you just gotta throw shit at the wall and see what sticks, you know. So there's my red on there. It's not completely done. You can see, let me show you the other leg that I had. So like if you look at those side by side, you can see this one's darker and kind of more filled in, whereas this one's got some parts that are not fully the way that I want it to be yet. It needs a little bit more red. Once that dries quite a bit, I'll go back over it and put some more of that contrast on there safely, where I'm not going to pull that up. So if I didn't mind redoing this, I would use some of this contrast over that while it's drying and show you how it'll mess it up, but I don't really feel like redoing this, so I'm not going to do that today. And I'm just doing the same thing here. Got my watered down contrast. Make sure it looks the way I want on my thumb. Start applying it here. And just make sure that it doesn't dry on me before I get finished. Once I see that it's starting to dry, stop, and then we'll come back to that. So that's the red. I'm going to now go back to some of the rivets on this one and get some more gold. If there are, let's see. Doesn't have to be now, but would love to see how you use that wet palette. Still using the kids' plastic palettes. Yeah, so this is my wet palette here. It's one that they have on Amazon for like, I think it's like 11 bucks. And I've actually sent it to a few people, people that I know that do a lot of painting. I've asked them in the past, like, you know, have you used a wet palette before? And if they say no, typically I'll just order one on Amazon and send it to their house, because it's such a good tool. And it comes with these sheets. So it's got basically it's just a palette, sponge. You wet the sponge, and then it's got these sheets that you can put over top of it. And what it does is it pulls the water in from the sponge through the sheet and helps keep your paints from drying out. So if you're using just a regular palette, which, do I have one over here? Yeah. So if you got a regular palette like this, you know, you see you get all the dry, crusty paints on it, and it starts drying pretty much immediately once you start using it. Whereas this, because the water is soaking through there, it keeps it wet and thinned. And I've had paints on here where, you know, I'll paint something, close this up, there's a lid on it, close it up. And this is the one I got, by the way. It's this Masterson's Stay Wet handy palette. And I've had some where I've, you know, put the lid on it, and, you know, 2 or 3 days later, I've still got the same paints and I'm able to use it. Now, metallics are a little bit different. Sometimes they dry out a little bit faster, even with a wet palette, but just FYI. And then I don't use the sheets that come with it because I find that they don't stay as wet as I would like them. Plus, they're a little expensive. They're not super expensive, but if you're replacing them constantly, it's going to cost more than the solution I use, which is just Reynolds parchment paper. So you get this stuff. Preferably, you want the stuff where it's got the lines on it for cutting. And then I just cut out little rectangles of it. And when you're switching these out, I would switch it, but I just switched it before I started this. You basically just pull that old one up, throw it away. You put the new one down. And what I do is I lay it down flat. I use my X-Acto knife and I rub all the bubbles out of it. And it'll usually try to curl up at the end. So then I'll pick it up, I'll flip it over, lay it down again, rub all the bubbles out, and then I flip it one more time, rub the bubbles out the last time, and then it'll usually lay flat like this, and then I can start using it. So that's how I do it. That's, you know, there's different ways that you guys can do these things, and I'm not saying my way is the right way, but it's the way that works for me. So highly recommend it. I love using my wet palette. So all right, hopefully that answered your question, Rick. If you have anything more specific, let me know. Let's see. Oh, and I missed one from Patrick. The night legs are always the ones I need to spend thought on how I want to do the details. Yeah, and it's really with all of it. Like, you know, I was looking at this, like the arms and stuff. You've got all these details here and how you want to do it, how you want to colorize it. One of the tips that I picked up from Emil, I'm not sure if this is going to show because I'm going to show it on a camera through another camera, but he will like kind of mock up his stuff ahead of time and then use his phone or use like Photoshop to color like which details he wants colored in and see what it looks like. So like this piece here, you know, it's rough. It doesn't look great, but like that is this part here. So I have not painted this yet, but because I did it on my phone, I have an idea of what I want it to look like. And then I can, so if I start getting, you know, what was this supposed to be yellow, or is that one, you know, where's that supposed to be? I can refer back to this and, you know, kind of follow that on where to go. It's becomes more like a paint by numbers kind of thing. So, all right, back to painting some of these gold parts. And if you guys have any more questions, let me put that back on my other phone so I can see your guys' questions. But if you have any other questions, let me know. Keep in mind, I'm by no means any sort of expert at this. I'm just sharing techniques that I use and things that I've picked up on. If it helps you, great. If it doesn't, that's cool too. Maybe you just had fun watching and hanging out for a little bit. But yeah, Patrick says he does mock-ups too. Yeah, it really does help, especially if you're, you know, you've got a very detailed pattern on things that you're going to use and you don't want to get lost or make a mistake. I don't know that I don't use it all the time, but something like this where I'm painting a lot of different parts from head to toe, I will try to do that. Hold on one second. Buddy. Hey. Buddy. Back in your bed. No. Back in your bed. That's not your bed. Over here. Down. There you go. Lay down. No. Lay down. Those people are allowed to walk their dogs too. Sorry, folks. Yeah, that's true, Patrick. The game, that customizing part of that game is going to be really helpful. You know, not only for, like you're saying, like mocking up stuff you already have, but even in seeing if you want to get some new parts. Like, you know, if I wanted to test, you know, let's say I didn't have this neck piece on any of the figures that I had, and I don't have a spare one, but I wanted to see what it would look like. Before I go buy a figure and grab it and test it out, I can, or even try to just buy that part individually, I'll be able to test it out on the game, see what it looks like, and decide if that's something that I really need for the custom that I'm working on. I find times that, like with this figure even, I thought that a certain neck piece was going to look good and it was going to work well. Well, then I popped the head on that I'm using and it looked a little off. So sometimes you got to kind of play around with it and try some different things. But yeah, that customizing part of the game will be very helpful. So, and then, you know, back to painting gold trim and gold rivets. Like I said, I'm not sure how interesting this is, but it's a good way to get some new looks without anything that's too terribly difficult. Hopefully by the time we get done with this live stream, at least we'll have a couple finished legs that you can look at and see, you know, compared to where we started, or just a basic, you know, all gunmetal look, how different it is. Now, some of these rivets, just something to be aware of. Like, right now I'm painting down on top of it from the side, but if you turn it to the front, sometimes on these rivets, like, you can't see the gold because the gold is on the outside. So sometimes you have to, after you've painted, look at it again from the front, from the way that you're going to view the figure. And what you may need to do is just grab a little bit more gold and then kind of try to, instead of hitting the top, kind of hit it from the front a little bit. So that way, when you're looking at it straight on, you can see that gold on the side. You can see this side, you can see the gold a lot better than you can this side. So, sometimes, depending on what details you're working on, it could be as simple as just putting a dot. And then sometimes you have to do a little bit more to it. Like, you know, these really small ones, like here, you know, that one you can just pop a dot on, you're good. But these other ones, like the bigger ones from the side, you know, you kind of have to hit it from the front a little bit as well. So, and then same thing here. So like the foot, you're going to be looking down on the foot most likely, depending on where it's at. So you want to make sure when you're looking down on this, you can see I just put some on kind of the top of this rivet here. So that one sticks out a little bit more, but these other ones I still need to add a little bit more towards the top. So anyway, that's it. pretty good. Actually, I'm going to do the trim on the outside of here, but I'll wait till I get that red the way I want it to first. So let me check this one out. Make sure I didn't miss any. Yeah, that one looks good. All right. And then I'm going to switch back over to my red. Make sure I got the right brush. Add a little bit more water over here. So I just, when I put that on my thumb, it didn't show through as much as I wanted to, so I just grabbed a couple drops of water on the wet palette and just mix that in with it. Now it's the right consistency that I want. And then, so now this part here has dried, but I don't want to just swipe over the whole thing again, because if I do, the parts that are darker that you see there are going to continue to get darker. And then the parts that are lighter will, like, I'm trying to get these lighter parts to match the part that's a little bit darker. So if I just swipe over the whole thing, that's not going to happen. It's going to, this part's going to continue to get darker while this one's still trying to catch up. So I'm going to try to strategically just hit the areas that I want to darken and leave the areas that I'm okay with. So like here. Once again, keep in mind I watered down this contrast a bit. If you're using it straight out of the jar, it's a little harder to do touch-ups like this because it's so concentrated that it's going to get dark on you real quick. So just kind of keep that in mind. Notice how when I'm touching up here, I'm really trying to avoid the recessed areas because those have already, the contrast has sunk into them and it's already darkened those up, and I don't want them getting any darker than they already are. So I'm trying to avoid those. So that looks the way I want it to. And then this one was already good, so. Alright, so the red is where I want it to be. And now I'm going to switch a little bit. I do need to do the trim around the red, but I'm going to wait till that red dries a little bit. So right now I'm going to do the dry brushing on the chain mail part of the leg, which is this top section here. So initially this is all just basic gray, kind of like the rest of the leg. It's a gunmetal, a little bit less than gunmetal, just, you know, but I colored this black. This is just a so flat black, and you can see how matte that comes out when you're done. And then I'm going to just dry brush some gold over it. I don't want it to be as bright gold as like the trim here. I want it to be more of a, like this had kind of a gold plating on it. But since it's chainmail, it's kind of worn down a little bit. So that's kind of the look that I'm going for. So let me grab a dry brush, and I'm going to use this one. Good. No, I'm going to use this one. This is just a tester's brush, Tester's 2. Jeremy kind of got me onto these brushes. You can get a 3-pack. It's like a 2, an 8, and a 10. Here's an 8, and here is a 10. And you can get those 3 brushes. If you find them on a good deal, you can get the 3 of them for like $10, 8 to 10 bucks. And they're as good a dry brush as you're probably going to get without spending a terrible amount of money. So just going to get some gold on there, which I don't know if you can, here. So I've got that on my wet palette. I'm just getting some gold on there on that brush, and I'm filling the bristles, but then I'm coming over here to my paper towels, which I use. This is the Viva. It's really thick, so you can use it use it, fold it, use it again, and it doesn't seep through like some other paper towels do. And I'm just drying off the paint off of the brush. And you really want to try to get quite a bit off of there, depending on how much paint you're looking to have on there. And I'm looking for this to be fairly light. So you want to dry all that off. And then once I'm done, this is just what I do. I usually do it on my hand, just to make sure that it's not a significant amount of paint coming off any way I do it. So once I'm happy with that, then I'll just take the piece and start dry brushing over that. Now as I do that, the benefit of dry brushing is I still have that black from underneath in the recessed areas. If I was just to like get a wet paintbrush and just wipe over it, that would go into the crevices, and I'm not looking to do that. I want that black to still show, but I want the gold to go over top of it. So that's kind of the look that I'm going for. And I'm probably going to do a couple different times of this, just to make that gold pop a little bit more. But I don't want to just, like, I could add more gold to my brush and not wipe off as much and make it the color that I want on the first pass, but then it would also get in that recessed areas. So instead I dry it off, do a dry brushing here. I'm going to hit this part as well. You can see it kind of gets this more like antique, almost like a bronze look to it. So that's my first pass. I'm going to do it again after that dries just a little bit, and then I'll just pop over the other one. And then same thing, get some paint on my brush, wipe it off. Once I feel like I've gotten majority of it off, just brush my thumb a little bit. Once I feel like there's not a terrible amount coming off, then I go to the part. Now, if when I move to the part and I took the first swipe, if I saw it fill a lot of those recesses up, then I would know that I still got too much paint on my brush, and I would go back. But I can still see the black through it, so I'm pretty comfortable with that. You can see here, you know, on the flat surface versus the rigid surface, like what that looks like. this is really a cool look here. So if you're doing just a flat, you know, whether it's a shield or just flat pieces of armor, you can still get a pretty cool kind of antique weathered look, you know, with some nice gold dry brushing over black. Okay, so that's a pretty good first pass. Then I'm going to go back to the first one I did, and I'm just going to do a second pass on it. See, as I wiped it on my thumb, there's like still quite a bit on that brush. So if I had just gone straight to the figure after the paper towel, it wouldn't have been the way that I wanted it to. So, all right. And now I'm just going over that again. You can see as I start taking that second pass, it's adding more gold to the top parts while still leaving that black in the recess. And that's the look that I was going for. So that's what I want. Keep in mind with all this stuff, this is how I do it. You know, you may have a different way. There's a lot of different ways to achieve the same or maybe even better results. So not saying this is the right way or the best way. This is just my way. And if any of this works for you, that's great. So all right, there's my second pass. So you can see that versus the first pass on this one. You can still see, like, even on the top parts, there's still some of the black coming through. So that second pass really helped bring out a lot of that gold. But you can see from that versus like the rivets or the trim, you know, it's not the same color. It's, even though it's the same paint that I used, that is a dry brush over black, whereas this is just strictly applying the paint directly to the part. So you can see it gives you two different looks, even though it's the exact same paint. And that's what I wanted. I didn't want this to be as bright as the trim. I want it to be like worn out a little bit. All right, I'm gonna put this one to the side. That's pretty good. And there it is. More gold. Gotta have the gold. So there we go. So that's what I wanted to achieve with that. I still need to do the trim on the outside of this red here, as well as underneath there. And I think I'll probably do these buckles black. So I'm probably going to have to do that and then go back over the gold rivets. But I didn't decide that till just now. As I'm looking at the side of this, that kind of sticks out to me as needing to be a little bit different. And then I'll do the gold trim around here to finish out. After that, I think that looks pretty good. So let's start working on that. I'm going to grab, this is a 10/0 ZEM brush. Once again, one of my favorite small detail brushes that you can get on Amazon for fairly cheap. And I'm just going to get some black. And I'm going over these buckles, which are very small. So you want to make sure that you have a brush that's going to allow you to do what you're trying to do. And I'm not going to worry about if I go over the rivets that I already painted, because I can always just put another dot on there and go from there. Now, another thing on this, because that buckle is raised up, it's not enough for me to just paint the top. I mean, I guess I could settle for that, but I'm not going to. I want to paint around the edge of it too, so that if you're looking from the back of the figure, the side of the figure, whatever, that buckle looks the right way all the way around. So on the side of the buckle, I'm just going to try to get that ridge without going on the rest of the leg. But if I do go on the rest of the leg, like I said earlier, I've kind of got what I feel like is a pretty good paint match for the Templar armor color that I can touch that up with if I need to. Okay, that one looks good. Going to the other side now. Be careful when you turn it over that you don't, put this in your hand and mess up the stuff that you just painted. So you want to make sure you strategically hold it in a way that you're not going to hit that same stuff. So I almost just put this right onto the armor, and I don't know if you can see that, but there's I kind of got a little blob at the end of the paintbrush. And so that's where I've got to remember to do it on my thumb first, get my paintbrush to the nice point that I'm looking for, and then go to the figure. So I know a lot of people talk about how pretty my nails are and all that kind of stuff when I post work in progress photos, but there really is a reason for it. And for me, it just helps me to make sure that I've got the right amount of paint and the right point on my paintbrush before I start applying paint to a figure. Yeah, I've done it, Dan. I think we all have done it, where you paint something and then you go to work on another part and you mess up the stuff you just painted by putting your finger in it or whatever. Just got to be as careful as you can, and don't be afraid to go back and touch it up later if you have to. Like I just noticed there on the back side of the leg here, I've got a little gold. And I'm not sure where that gold came from. I'm sure I touched something, probably from touching the top here where it was still wet from the dry brush, and then touched the back of that leg. So, I'm going to have to go back through and either see if I can, get it off or touch it up. And it's probably going to have to be a touch up. If you catch it quick enough, I get these things here from Hobby Lobby, where it's like these little pointed Q-tips, and I'll just get some water on one of the ends and try to rub it on that area that's got some paint on it that I don't want. And if you catch it quick enough, a lot of times this will work. So I've got water on this end's dry, and then I'll just kind of go over this, see if I can pull up that paint. Just rub it real good. And then go over it with the other one with the dry end. And now it's gone. So now I don't have to touch that up. And these, because they're pointed, you can get into spots. So like, let's say I painted this trim around here. And let's say that I got on the silver part where I didn't want to. Because these are pointed, I can get into that real tiny area like this and rub it. And do the same thing there. And usually kind of fix anything that I've messed up. So, and then you can see I ended up, when I was putting the black on here, I got some black on this trim. So I'm going to have to touch that up as well. So it's all a process, you know. I would like to be able to do it without making any mistakes and just have it go smooth. But that's very rarely the case. You can see I got a little black on there as well. But my little pointy Q-tip thing saved me again. So, alright. And now I'm going to work on some more of this gold trim and try to finish at least this one leg out so that I can show you what the finished one's going to look like. I do need some more gold though. So I'll get back my retribution armor. Thanks, Brian. Put some more on my wet palette. And use my 20 ZEM. Make sure that thin it down just a little bit with some water. Check it on my thumb. Is that what I want? Not really. That's better. All right, so I'm gonna do this ridge around the bottom part of this right now. So I'm gonna start here. Just start working my way across. Once again, the details are already there for you. They're already sculpted. So all you're doing is just following that sculpt and, you know, painting inside the lines that the Four Horsemen have given you. So there's that ridge. And then, you know, you could probably just leave it like this, but I wouldn't feel good leaving it like this without getting the underside of that same ridge. So I don't know if you're going to be able to see that there, but the underside, in my opinion, should be painted as well. So I'll just turn it this way and start working on that same ridge from underneath. And, you know, this is kind of why when I'm painting when I'm doing a full custom, it takes me quite a while because I want to make sure that every detail is correct and the way that I want it to be. So even though you're probably never going to see the underside of this ridge, you know, based on how you have it on your shelf, I'll know that it's not painted, and that doesn't work for me. So okay. So now I've got that ridge all the way around. And typically after I've done the top part of the ridge, the bottom of the part of the ridge, then I look at just the edge and make sure that there's no parts that are sticking out without paint on them. Especially in case, I might have touched it or something as I was going through there. Because that's the part that's going to be the most important. Because as this figure is standing in whatever way, that edge is what you're going to see most. So there's that. Now I need to do on the outsides of this red, but that is a very small area. So I'm going to switch to a different brush. Switch into my 10/0 ZEM brush. Same paint. And I'm going to work on that area. So this is very small detail, but you can see on the left side of that red now is some gold. That's the look I'm going for. And now the right side. Let's see if that focuses. So that's what I was looking for there. And at this point I've done the chainmail, I've done the red, done the gold. I've still got to do the rest of this ridge here. And then after that I just got to do some touch-up work. So there's where I had the black earlier. I'm going to turn this. Do the rest of this trim. Once again, this is like, the back part of the leg. I know that this character is going to be wearing a cloak. Not going to see this, but I know it's there, and I wouldn't feel good with leaving it without painting it. So all right, now we've got these black buckles that we did a little bit ago where we covered over the rivets. So we're going to go and just put those rivets back in. And you can see now with the black and then the rivets, it's a small detail, but instead of that just being all gray on that buckle and now being black with the gold, makes it pop. So and now I'm just kind of looking over the other little rivets, the trim, all that kind of stuff, and making sure everything looks the way that I want it to. Putting any last minute touches on here. Make sure I didn't miss anything. And the more that I look at this, I think I want to paint this ridge right underneath the chainmail part, because it got a little bit of gold on it from the dry brushing, and I think this will help separate that and make it stand out a little bit. Once again, this is going to be underneath the waist piece, so you're not going to see this, but I don't know. I want it painted. I think to me this will make me feel like this part is more complete. And then I'm trying to do this in a way where I'm not going to ruin anything that I've already painted. So we don't want to touch any of that wet paint. Okay. So let's take a look. So this is what I would call a finished leg for my Templar. This is going to be for my judge character. I did paint up the hammer, which you may have already seen pictures of in the den. So this is the hammer for him. There was the original hammer was kind of two separate pieces. This is the first one that we have where it's one solid piece. I really like the details on this. So there's the hammer. Here's one of the legs. I've already started working on the head. Not quite finished, but there's my head so far for him. So I got a little work to do on there. But when I start doing the detail on the body, I usually try to start from the feet and work my way up, because then if I wanted to, before I finish this and clear coated it or whatever, I can start building this figure. So if I start with the legs, I can put my leg here, put my leg there, put the weight, and I can start building this character, you know, as I go and paint. So that's, I don't know, I just always like starting with the feet on the armor and working my way up. So there's a finished leg. If you have any questions, let me know. I will be posting a picture of this finished leg in the Wolf Den. And I think that's it. Appreciate everybody stopping by. Thanks.